Oil in the kettle, isn't it?
Watch out, Mark, tonight too. Tony will pinch your iPad.
Oh, is that what?
You leave it laying about, you
Yours
deserve
looks
to
like
lose.
it's under
Don't you have
control.
it?
Yeah, he took it on me. He wanted the hard copy, but I only give him the iPad.
Okay, welcome everyone. Public is advised that it's council policy to record the proceedings of the meetings of council on digital media to assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure that a true and accurate account of debate and discussion of meetings is available. This audio recording is authorised by the Local Government Meeting Procedure Regulations 2015. The Circular Council acknowledges the North West Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of the country on which we stand, meet and play. We recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We'll be upstanding for prayers, but please stay standing and we'll have a moment's silence for past Councillor John Jacobs, who passed away. He was a councillor in the early 1990s.
Tonight we pray to you who art Mother, Father to us all for wisdom and clarity in discussion and debate. We ask that thy light and eternal grace shine in our hearts now and always. You who are one, although known by many names, and whose truth is expressed in many faiths.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Oldacre. Everyone else is in attendance and no leave of absence. 2.0, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover that the minutes of July council meeting be adopted, please, or confirmed as a true record?
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Dabner. Second, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Declarations of interest.
We have one staff declaration of interest, Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
for agenda item number 9.4.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, 4.0 or 4.1, Mayor's Communications. The list there, is there any questions or queries in that?
Yes, I may, 17th to the 7th, the visit to VDL prototype solar system. What's that all about?
There's a group from, testing my memory, Councillor Hine, the University in Sydney anyway, who were down here. There was 3 PhD students and a professor with them. They was doing some work down at VDL and looking at battery storage of power and working through with that from there. So the meeting was just to inform what was going on. They did say they were going to touch base and possibly present to the council as a workshop some stage, but I haven't heard nothing, so we haven't heard nothing back as yet. But if they do, they can come and present what they're doing.
Students where from?
University in Sydney.
Sydney?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. The Arthur Pyman Conservation, anything to report out of that at all?
Nothing outside of where things, nothing new on that. Nothing new.
Yep.
All this process. The minutes are going up on the website if anyone wishes to
That's what I was going to say.
check the minutes out now.
Are they?
You go on the Arthur Pyman website and get their minutes.
Oh,
So the minutes of the meeting are posted there. I'd imagine they'll be posted already, but shortly after the meetings. Yep.
and the meeting with Selena Maguire, the CHAC?
Stand catch up with Selena. We'll catch up with Selena every 6 to 8 weeks. And it was just to catch up to see if there's nothing special at this point in time. So I catch up with Selena and I catch up with Sergeant Walters on a 6 to 8 week rotation.
Thank you.
No more, thank you. Do we need to note them? No. Everything, reports I do, and the council workshops are noted as well. 5.0, public questions, none there. We can certainly, what have I done?
Both the communications and the workshops
We do them, do we? My apologies. So can I have a move, and we'll put them in one motion for the Mayor's communication and the workshops to be noted.
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Pilkington, Councillor Hine. I'll put the motion, those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. No public. 6.0, planning items. So I will remind the councillors that at this point we are sitting as a planning authority, and moving with that, the first one, 6.3.
6.1.
6.1. 6.1. Eco cabins and.
Yep, if I could, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move a motion to defer this matter until the September meeting, just to give us a little more time to seek further advice and consider everything that's involved with this one.
Thanks, Councillor Dabner. So, seconded by Councillor Flowers. As it's a procedural motion, there's no debate. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
I'm going to turn George around, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, probably so. As long as George can see, because we'll need George to work this time. So 6.2 is the 20 Airy Drive Arthur River.
Is that better?
There's 6.4.
We can see him.
6.4.
So I'll hand to you, George.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. So, development application DA 2023-00002 is for an application for a shed and a dwelling located at 20 Airy Drive at Arthur River. 20 Airy Drive, Arthur River is zoned village, and the application triggers two discretions under the planning scheme. First discretion relates to frontage setback. Now, the particular matter at hand with regards to the front setback relates to the location of fire tanks. These are fairly minor structures when considered against the proposed shed. The assessment of this particular discretion is such that because of the location of existing vegetation, the fact that they're reasonably small structures within the context of other buildings, and certainly the proposed building on the site, is that it satisfies the performance criteria, which requires buildings to be compatible with the streetscape and character of development existing on established properties. We look more broadly within Arthur River, along Airy Drive and all other parts of Arthur River really, which I'm sure most of you, if not all, would be familiar with the area. It is fairly compact and condensed, a lot of smaller lots that do have buildings, not just water tanks, but other larger sheds and so forth that are located on or within close proximity to the front boundary. So on that basis, it's deemed that the proposal satisfies the performance criteria in relation to the front setback. The other matter of discretion relates to the side boundary setback, and that is in relation to the south-western boundary, and that adjoining property contains a building which is a dwelling or used as a shack, most likely interchangeably, as well as an outbuilding as well. With respect to the performance criteria, the requirement is that buildings are to be sited so that there is no unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties. And there are effectively seven tests under that performance criteria. The key tests in this relate to the height, bulk and form of the proposed building, the sunlight to private open space and windows of habitable rooms on adjoining properties, and as well as the character of development within the surrounding area. So if we focus on those 3 points, in terms of the height, bulk and form, the proposed building satisfies the building height requirements. So effectively under the terms of the scheme, it has a height that's appropriate for the zone. So it would be considered that the height of the building is reasonable within the context of this particular performance criteria. Again, the bulk and form, and if we look at that within the context of the character of the surrounding area, there are examples of quite large outbuildings that are close or within proximity to side or rear boundaries, as well as larger houses as well. So the form of the building within the context of the surrounding area is deemed to be compatible. Probably the key criteria that we need to consider is the one that relates to sunlight to private open space and windows of habitable rooms on adjoining properties. So as I said before, the only adjoining property that's triggered or for us to consider under the performance criteria is to the southwest, and that property owner did put in a representation, and that property is 22 Airy Drive. The test is fairly it's fairly black and white, as in it is asking us to consider sunlight to private open space and habitable rooms of adjoining properties. So, put in a different way, we're considering the effect of overshadowing caused by this proposed building upon the adjoining property, and in particular whether it's going to cause a loss of sunlight to the habitable building, as well as to private open space. So as part of the application, shadow plans were requested and provided. The shadow diagrams show, due to the orientation of the building, which is reflective of the site, it effectively has a long axis that's orientated northwest to southeast. The shadow diagrams do indicate that there will be some overshadowing in the morning of June 21. Now, June 21's been specified because that's deemed to be the worst day of the year in terms of overshadowing. It's the shortest day of the year, which means if access to sunlight is good on this day, then it follows that access to sunlight on the opposite solstice in December is going to be better because the sun's higher and there's less overshadowing. So that's why we focus on June 21. It does show that whilst there is overshadowing in the morning, the extent of overshadowing recedes during the course of the day. So when we get to 12 noon, we can see that the shadows receded to only what is the driveway of that adjoining property. And then by 3 p.m. on June 21, it's even less. So there is a level of overshadowing that will occur to the adjoining dwelling, the habitable rooms of that dwelling. On the basis of, and the way that we consider whether or not it's reasonable, we do need to take into context the location, the site, and the uses, and sort of other factors within the area. So it will cause some overshadowing, but it's not considered to be an unreasonable loss of amenity on the basis that that overshadowing will recede and those windows will receive sunlight as the sun moves around during the course of the day, again on the 21st of June. if we were to look, I don't think we do have overshadowing plans, but if we were to look at overshadowing plans on the 21st of December, we would almost see almost no overshadowing occurring to that adjoining property. The other component is the matter of private open space. Now, if we were to look at an aerial of the, and what I might do is is it easy if I share a screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yep, thank you.
I'll do that. It might make it a little bit easier. I'll just bring up the list, take us away from Little Harkers. And I'll try and get where Tim hasn't gone too far. Make some of these overlapped off. So I'll just highlight this.
Okay.
Just highlighted the site of the proposed development, which is this here. We can see, just as a note, the cadastre being the lines on the map which show the titles, it is out. We can see a variation between the fence line and the cadastre. That's not uncommon. So the boundary doesn't go through this neighbouring property. It just means that we need to shift boundary. But if we can consider that the cadastre runs with the fence line, we can see that this is the shed, this is the shack slash dwelling. The overshadowing, and by reference to the plans that are submitted, which form part of the agenda, shadowing at the 21st of June and also on the 12 p.m. and also at 3 p.m. It occurs to this area, which is the driveway leading up to the shed. It's not a formed driveway in terms of it's not a gravel or a steel driveway, but clearly we can see that it's being used as a driveway. Now, in terms of the definition of what private open space is, under the planning scheme, I will just bring it up. So private open space, it means an outdoor area of the land or dwelling for the exclusive use of occupants of the land or dwelling, excluding areas proposed or approved for vehicle access or vehicle parking. So based on the definition that we have within the scheme, the area of the site of the adjoining property, that will have some overshadowing that doesn't fall on the building is not in fact private open space. So based on the shadow diagrams, we can see that there's not going to be an unreasonable impact on overshadowing of private open space because by the time the sun moves around to about 10 o'clock, it starts falling on the driveway, as I said, which doesn't constitute private open space. So on that basis and on the basis of the assessment provided by Council's town planner, it's contended that the application satisfies the performance criteria. So in conclusion, the two performance criteria that are triggered, which are front setback and side boundary setback, which are triggered by the proposed development, have been deemed to be satisfied based on the assessment. And just to take it back, I should have mentioned right from the beginning, the proposed use of the building has been categorised into the residential use class as a single dwelling, which has I believe a no permit required status in the zone. I'm just doing that. Yeah, so use of land for a single dwelling within the village zone has a no permit required status within the zone table, which means that the two discretions relate solely to these performance criteria. So I think that should provide a reasonable summary. If you have any other questions along the way, please let me know, but otherwise I will put it back into your hands.
Thanks, George. Is there any questions for George before we move on?
George, is there any caveats on the blocks within the village like there are in the other nodes within the area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of caveats, there's a general overlay within I'm just bringing it up on my other computer. There's a general overlay that relates to local area objectives, but they aren't triggered. In terms of caveats, did you have an example that you might be able to use?
Yeah, height of fences, types of fauna and flora. Flora. There's about 8 caveats on other blocks within the nodes down there. I just wondered if it was appropriate to the village. Maybe not.
Yeah. Look, I'm not aware of any of those such caveats. There's certainly exemptions within the scheme that relate to boundary fences. So, for example, there's an exemption that allows a boundary fence between 2 properties, such as the village zone, to be constructed to 2.1 metres. So there are things like that do apply, that they apply across different zones. But there's no particular caveats on this property that I'm aware of.
Is there any maximum height of a building, like 24 foot or anything?
Yes. The maximum height of the building under the zone, I'll just bring that up. Maximum height is 8.5 metres.
Yep.
Yes.
And
That's an acceptable solution, so it can be varied, but the acceptable solution being the box ticking pathway, to put it in fairly simple terms, is 8.5 metres.
Yep, good. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so if not, is there a mover for the recommendation?
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Poposky. Seconded by Councillor Collins. Councillor Poposky, you wish to...
No, thank you.
Councillor Collins, you're up.
I just think that if it passes all criteria, it's acceptable by all terms, so I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be voted in.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, George.
No worries. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Aye.
Bye.
7-0, 7-1-0, 7-2-0, 7-3. Councillor, questions without notice? Is there any questions without notice? Oh, sorry, we are back in our council meeting now. So any questions without notice? Okay, thank you. 8.0, notice of motion nil. 9.1, audit panel minutes of meeting June 27.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillors, before you we've got a report on the audit panel in general with 3 recommendations on it. The audit panel is actually a mandatory requirement set under Section 85 of the Local Government Act. So that came in a number of years ago, I think it was about 2015, that we had to have this audit panel. So we have 2 sort of sets of auditors. We have the Tasmanian Audit Office that provide an interim audit and an end of financial year audit. But we also have this audit panel, which is an external skills-based panel. We've currently got 3 members on it: Steve Allen, Paul Viney, and Lisa Dixon. So this report is to note the annual report of the audit panel, which is attached, adopt the new charter, which has been a couple of years since we've looked at the charter, and also approve the reappointment of Lisa Dixon as an independent member. So on page 262, which is page 1 of the annual report, in the middle there, as in reviewing the council's performance, the audit panel considers. So there's 2, 4, 5 dot points there, which is the main aim of that committee. So it looks at our, predominantly probably 70% still looks at our financial circumstances and our processes and policies, etc., and governance in that space, but also in terms of governance and risk, IT, there's a whole bunch of areas that they actually audit. we act under, we operate under so many acts as well too. So they look at delegations and compliance with acts and things like that. So they meet quarterly, and then a report comes back to council after that. So with that, Mr Mayor, I think there's also the fees outlined in that report as well, of what because it is a skill board. So I shall present the report for council's consideration.
Thanks, Rachel. Is there any questions before I ask for a mover?
Just on page 263, those 5 points, so that, thanks. On those, on 263, the 5 points, they're being continued being sort of addressed and
So those ones, through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Hine, those 5 points at the top of 263, what happens is we have the external auditors, as in the Tasmanian Audit Office, do a memorandum of audit findings each financial year, and they're things that they might pick up in the financial statements because it's a fairly long process and some things are not material that need adjusting, so they're just noted. Some things they make recommendations on where we could improve our processes. So they were some of the ones that were in from last year's. So that memorandum of audit findings actually goes on the audit panel agenda for them to have a look at and make some comments on and some recommendations on how we go about fixing those. So I can safely say that all those have actually been ticked off this year. In the last few months, and hopefully it'll only be new ones from this audit that will actually be on the new memo. So yes, we have.
Thank you.
Yep.
On page 264, that just an explanation, I guess, but what's componentisation in point 1 on?
Yep. Through you, Mr Mayor.
Of the soil infrastructure. What does that mean?
Componentisation is breaking it down into its smallest parts. So instead of maybe us seeing the swirl building as a building and depreciating it at 40 years or 2.5%, it's broken down into its plant components, which may have a smaller or longer life than that, and to make sure that we get our depreciation and our useful lives of those separate components of a building and the plant actually broken down at their lowest level. So that's what that's all about.
And is there a time frame when that's going to be done?
I'd probably need to take that on notice. I know there's been some work happening in that space, but it's not my sort of...
No.
I know about it and I understand about it, but in terms of timeframes, Councillor Hine, I wouldn't be able to provide you with that.
No, through you, Mr Mayor, there is some work being done by the Asset Management Coordinator in that regard. But again, that is a task he's having to juggle with a number of other things. But we would hope that would be completed by the end of this calendar year.
Thank you. And point 4, do we have that that document? That's been presented to us, and if so, what's it identified as?
The investment.
This has been conducted and updated, document prepared and presented.
Oh, the investment policy, through you, Mr Mayor, the investment policy.
Yes.
That came to council in, I think,
May?
before that, I think March. It was either February or March that come back to council for review. I think through Mr Mayor at the time it was discussed around council potentially putting some money in the Bendigo Bank and looking at the ratings and that around that. So that's why that was reviewed at the time. It wasn't up for renewal, but council reaffirmed their position on that as well, which allows us to now do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hine. Any other questions? If not, could I have a mover that the report be accepted? Thanks, Councillor Dabner, seconded by Councillor Flowers. No further debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 9.2, budget amendment. Rachel again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you we have a report for a proposed budget amendment to allow for 2 additional positions in this year's budget, one for a facilities and properties coordinator and one for a landscape designer. A briefing paper was presented to councillors previously on this. In terms of the facilities and properties coordinator, this is a resource shared position with Waratah Wynyard. Currently at the moment we have, we have a number of areas in the properties and probably property management and facility management space that are included in other people's roles, which probably doesn't give them the time and effort that they actually need to
Give the best result.
Yeah, give the best result that the council are looking for. So, so they're sort of orphaned at the moment, and we need another person who has the skills in that space to be able to manage those. Waratah, we currently have, or the Circular Head Council currently have a properties person in place that does all the administration for a lot of our properties building, so purchasing and selling properties, doing leases, insurances, those types of things. Waratah Wynyard don't have that person, so the role is sort of a little bit of a split role. It's more of a contract management role here, so to include things like the Swirl, the Stanley Caravan Park, Montague Park, our Freedom Campsite, the Wharf, those types of things. Whereas at Waratah Wynyard End, it's looking like a 2-day-a-week position, looking at the properties administration side of things. So that's where the role sort of sits. In terms of the landscape designer role, that role has been put forward by the Infrastructure and Development Services Department. It's about having a person with the necessary skill set on staff. Council are looking towards future planning, especially in terms of, you know, Smith and Stanley, the whole municipality. We've had, I think there was a question asked about whether we've had this position before, and not in this capacity, but we did have a person here a number of years ago, Mr. John Bedford, if you remember John. He worked as he was a landscape architect, so we had him on staff for a number of years, and that's where a number of our plans were actually developed by having somebody on staff. So the Smithton Trails plan, the Stanley Trails plan, the Eastern Foreshore Master Plan, and there was the Smithton Landscape Development Plan. So he was involved in the development of all of those. So there was no sort of consultancies paid for his component of that. In the last number of years, we haven't had this position on the staff, but we've also probably not paid a whole lot out in consultancies for this role either. Now's coming the time when you're making some more strategic decisions in this space, and to have a person on staff to be able to utilise as part of those plans that's where the role sits basically. So, and that would be a full-time circular head role. So we're around $170,000 asking for a budget amendment at this point in time. Thank you, and I'll present the report for Council's consideration.
Thanks, Rachel. Any questions?
The figures that are put there, I can be excused from standing, please.
Oh, yes, you can, sorry.
The figures shown, are they, you've got wages and
Yes.
on costs. Is it on cost vehicular, or are we talking about total employment cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just talking about total employment costs. So there's no vehicles involved with normal use of
wages plus
fleet
superannuation.
vehicles, super, payroll tax, training, workers' comp, leave.
Yep,
Yep.
very good, thank
Yep.
you.
Councillor Hine first, and Councillor Gould.
Yes, you just sort of touched on a little bit that you probably haven't been relying on consultants, but the second and third line of the third paragraph says urban areas currently dealt with in an ad hoc manner and often involves heavy reliance on consultants, so that's conflicting with what you said.
It would do.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. For example, the Stanley Church Street master planning process, part of the cost of that consultancy was costing landscape design. So what we've done is extrapolated from those costs. So if we did a project like we've done in Stanley, in Smithton, which we hope to do, we've effectively paid for the cost of that person. So the consultant costs, we wouldn't need to spend anymore. And then we have that person sort of ongoing. Sorry, Phil's got his hand up as well.
I'll go to Councillor Pilkington and then to you, Phil.
Vanessa's answered my question.
Thank you, Phil.
Good evening, everyone. Just in line with that question, I think there's been you'll agree that the urban areas or the village areas of Stanley and Smithton are run down and dilapidated. There's been a lack of a coordinated approach to landscape improvements, amenities, and the visual quality of these places, particularly Smithton, could be improved a lot. I think there's a hidden cost to council in not taking a strategic approach because we deal with landscape matters such as trees, garden beds, shrubbery, our amenities in on an as needs basis rather than a strategic basis. So a lot of the costs, how effectively are we spending our money on landscape improvements? Because a lot of these improvements are occurring through operation, through the depot, in other words, who make decisions about matters to do with landscape improvements across the municipality. So how well do we get value for money through doing things on a here and now basis? So part of the overall strategy for infrastructure and development services is to look at how we can have a much more strategic approach to improvements of our public realm across our towns and villages. So there's a hidden cost by doing it in an uncoordinated manner. And I believe that council would benefit from having much more strategic plans that are costed, prioritised and implemented through firstly through strategic planning, and then for those projects to go into the depot to actually implement. So it's a much more structured and streamlined approach by having someone in council which is a focus for those improvements. So there's a shift in emphasis, in conclusion, there's a shift in emphasis from operational to strategic to look at where we get the best bang for our buck. And I believe that that's, perhaps since John Bedford left council, that's left a vacuum in the way that we're approaching the public realm and a coordinated approach to the public realm. So that's why, I believe this staff member is integral to the council's approach going forward. And we saw with the Church Street Master Plan, those images which you would have seen, there's a lot of landscape component and elements to those plans. And we need to actually proceed with a much more informed approach rather than an approach which is coming through our operational arm of council. So, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Any further questions?
Yeah, Phil, I agree with what you're saying as far as a lot of the decisions out of operation. Is it the understood thing that that the operations will replace like for like on dead and vandalised trees? Because it seems to me, in a typical case is Montague Road, which we fought hard for streetscape.
Yes, Councillor Popowski, you're getting a bit off track.
No, I'm just asking a question about the operation replacement like for like.
We're not talking about the operation thing, we're talking about...
Phil was talking about the operations.
Well,
It-
Mr Mayor, if I may, I sort of get the gist of this question, Ashley, and I think it's a good one, is that, for example, what type of trees should we be planting in places? Should we, for example, in Stanley, should we putting indigenous trees in, or should we be putting introduced species in, for example? So I think that question about strategy and planning is that I think we need to actually understand what the future character of our towns are going to be, and then set up a planting a regime and approaches and policies, which is actually giving us a much more coherent streetscape. At the moment, I think a lot of our approach has been pretty ad hoc and depends on who thinks what tree should go where, or what type of park bench should go somewhere, or what types of rubbish tins we should have, and they're all different in different areas. So I think it's important that we get a much more consistent approach to how we're making these improvements, which helps with our maintenance and the overall image of our centres.
Thanks, Phil. Okay. Have we got a mover for the recommendation? Thanks, Councillor Pilkington. Seconder, Councillor Dabner. Debate, Councillor Pilkington, you wish to add anything?
I'd just like to say that I think the process forward that we're hoping to make benefits from the landscape designer. The other one seems to fall into place with the sharing with Wynyard. I think it's probably going to be cost effective and good planning.
Thank you. Councillor Dabner?
Nothing Phil and Steve haven't already mentioned.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Financial report.
Oh, you nearly second me, Mr Mayor. Councillors, before you we have the financial reports for the period ended 31st of July. We received no applications for first homeowners grant. The closing funds for the special committees have managed to get out of whack there, but the balances are still there for you to read. In terms of the comprehensive income statement or the profit and loss statement, our actual year-to-date is a surplus of 8.8 compared to a budget year-to-date of 8.5, which is going well, on target. In terms of the financial position, we currently have total equity of 272 million, compared to 263 at the same time, actually 30th of June last year. In terms of the cash flows, we've currently got cash at the end of the period of 18.2 million, and we currently have rates outstanding of 86.19% compared to 86.23% at the same time last year, so slightly above where we were at the same time. We then have the bank rec and cash balances, including our term deposits at the rates identified on page 282. And also I've included this month, I think I've been mentioning before about some expanded reports. So we've just started that process. So over the next 12 months, you'll see some different ones coming forward. This one is just per service area, so transport, solid waste, drainage, etc. And it's just put a revenue expenses net result for each of those for the last few years and the budget. Then we have the comparison of cash and investments money at the end of the period. So I'll present that for, actually before I do that, Mr Mayor, we've got the on-site audit next week as well too. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week we'll have the Crow auditors on site. So hopefully we'll have an idea of where we're sitting pretty soon after that. So I'll present the report for Council's consideration.
Thanks, Rachel. Any questions?
Yes, I've got a number of questions. Thanks, Mr Mayor. First one being, I note the great work that these committees are doing. There's over nearly $120,000 sitting in bank balances at the end of July. What are the plans, or what do council know of the plans that we're going to do with this money?
Sorry, let me just find that.
These are the area,
Individual committees, 22 for the
yep,
Central.
22, 14, 72, 6, basically, 5.5. So what's your question, sorry,
The
Councillor?
question is, there's money there and we provide money to these committees, but I noticed the bank balances through hard work are over $120,000, and I was just wondering what is earmarked for that money, what kind of things, what's the plans of these committees? I tried to ask that we get president's reports from each of these committees, each annual meeting. I'm not quite sure whether that gets done, but I'd like to know what they plan to do with the money, reserve it, put it on term deposit, spend it on.
If you take the Stanley Town Hall out of that, there's only 10 grand each average, so that would be just start operating money for the next year, for that matter. The Stanley Town Hall, I don't know whether Deb's got
Through
any
you,
idea.
Mr Mayor, the motorised movie screen will be purchased through that. That's looking to be about $15,000.
Yep, 15.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, too. Also, in terms of term, you explained term depositing the money to get interest on it. That is in council's account. It's not in any separate account. So we as a collective get the interest on those monies. So they're not sitting anywhere
So
separate.
that's sitting in our funds, it's just
Yeah,
accounted
it's just
for.
accounted for in a reserve.
I mean, it's
Yep.
a great thing that
Yep.
these people are working hard and doing that, but
Yep.
like you said, most of that money is probably operational money that we've put in, and they've probably raised 4,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I think 3, Mr Mayor. The idea behind it to start off with was to provide incentives for the committees to be motivated to, earn that extra income. So, say for instance, the town hall are pretty active
Yes.
in terms of the events and things like that, the income generation activities that they actually do there. Whereas some of the other committees may not be. So in terms of rewarding them for that process, the funds are just kept in a reserve. So basically, the operational budget stays pretty consistent each year, and then if they do any work or on top of that to gain extra income, that goes into this account for them to be able to then do the purchases that they're going to do. So, but I understand what you're saying in terms of, what that might look like in the next 5 years.
If,
And what they intend to spend on it,
Yeah,
like they've
yeah.
obviously got a motorised.
Yep.
if they was all sitting at 80,000, it might be a question that we would look at.
$1 a dollar, Mr Mayor.
A dollar, you're certainly right, Councillor Paposky. Any further questions?
Yes.
Oh, sorry,
On,
keep going.
on page 281, there's a interim receivable summary. I'm not quite sure of the headings. July, last year, 31st of July 23.
Oh, there.
This year, 31st of July 23.
Yeah,
I'm not quite
22.
sure
Sorry,
what you're trying to tell me.
The middle column there is supposed to be 22.
22.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
No wonder I'm
You're onto it.
observant.
Yeah, well picked up.
No, I'll let you off the other questions. You've done a good job.
Thank you, Councillor Paposky. Any further questions? If not, could I have a mover that the financial reports be accepted, please?
I'll better, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Paposky, Deputy Mayor. No further debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Seniors 9.4, Smithton Senior Citizen Centre. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report comes before you for a formal decision to proceed after discussion and debate. We are following the required process in legislation. The expression of interest came back with responses, and the recommendation is as set out before you. The consensus in discussion was that this is potentially a good outcome for the community, so with that I commend the report.
Thanks, Vanessa. Questions, Councillor?
No, not a question, no. I'm prepared to move that.
Oh, okay. Just, I'll come back to you. Any questions? No, thank you. Yes, councillor Hine, you're moving.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's
Yep, just a sec, and a seconder. Councillor Flowers, now you can go.
I think it's a good initiative and something that the community has put a lot of work into in the past, and if we can retain a body like that, can take it over with the provision that we can buy it back if we need to at the price that we've worked out. It's a win-win for everyone.
Thanks, councillor Hine. Councillor Flowers, you wish to add?
No, Rod.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Senior Manager's report. Again, General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Oh, I forgot to have it taken off on us. That's quieter than me.
So this month we've reported on some governance updates and the start of the digital transformation, but perhaps of more interest, would you like to comment on the science gig?
Yeah, just a couple of things, councillors, that I'd like to highlight. The science gig, again, was another wonderful event. There was nearly 400 people there, I think, which is fantastic. But I'd also like to recognise Amber Power, our Community Development Officer, for the work that she does to coordinate that event. It's a credit to her, and it's a fantastic community. So thanks for that one. Just with the charts event that's happening in September, we've already received some fantastic positive feedback about the program. So it looks like we'll be very busy during September, so that's exciting. And also attached to the report, councillors, is the suicide prevention community action plan. And I think at our workshop last week, Jodie probably mentioned that some training was going to be organised, the accidental counsellor. That's going to be held on Monday, next Monday, a couple of sessions, one during the day and one in the evening. And we already have 27 registered for that, so that's really positive. And that's come out of what people said in our survey for when we developed the plan, as well as it fits really well with our the Right Place program. So we're able to help out business owners there as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Deb and General Manager.
I've got a question. Deb, how much do you involve the local GP practice in these things when you're doing them?
The science gig?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Because
we do.
The mental health.
Have medical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, the mental health wellbeing.
The community.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, we do. We actually, Jodie went and visited the medical centre and talked about the development of the program and everything like that too. So yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's important.
Very important
to involve them.
Yeah. So they understand what's that people might be coming to see them. And, yeah, very much so.
Any further questions? I'll say thank you to the Deputy Mayor for filling in for me when I didn't read my invitation properly. So apologies to Amber and thank you to the Deputy Mayor.
No worries.
Okay, can we have a mover and second that the report be noted, please? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Seconded, Councillor Collins. No debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. 9.6.1. We've got a series. We'll go through a series of minutes and move them all in one motion. So we've got the circular head, health and wellbeing collective minutes. Is there any questions or comments on those? Then we go to the Stanley Town Hall Committee. Same thing. Questions or comments? Tarkine Progress Group, questions or comments?
My question on the progress group, Mr. Mayor, it's not so much the minutes, or I read the minutes, but we fund this group and I can't recall them coming given an annual presentation or I don't know what the plans are for the money that we fund them with. Have you got any knowledge of that?
Yeah, there'll be, the MOU is about due, so that'll come to a workshop in the next couple of workshops. And then we can work through that at that time, Councillor Poposky. So yes, that discussion will be had at the workshop in the next couple of weeks.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, next couple of workshops.
Yeah.
They're all Tarkine Progress Group minutes. And the SWIRL, April, May, brief report. If there's no further questions or comment, could I have a move that all those minutes be noted? Thanks, Councillor Dabner. Seconded.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Pufsky. No debate. I put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And there's all, what have we got? No public correspondence, so that's a nil.
There was another, didn't we have another email, the public correspondence? It's not here. Received correspondence July 23. There was 3 received.
July.
Sorry, I'm missing something. I'm in the wrong place at that rate.
Maybe it's not appropriate, but we got an email to say.
Oh, yes, sorry, that's a late one.
I thought that was tied to the correspondence of the meeting, that's all. It's not important. But
Oh, I think, through you, Mr Mayor, that was after the agenda, so
Yep,
not appropriate to this meeting.
not for this meeting.
No, thank you.
thank you. Where are we at? We are now, I need a meeting to
Resolution
resolution to consider the
matters.
matters in the closed meeting. So, could I have a move and a second accordingly, please? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Second, Councillor Flowers. The motion, those in favour?
No.
Against? Carried. And another motion that by absolute majority we close the meeting to the public.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Hine. Second, Councillor Poposky. Put the motion, those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.